Okay, welcome to the third part of the questionnaire design on Google Forms. So we've entered the questions, section 1, section 2, section 2 of 3, then section 3, right? Opinion on the impact of the library. So fast, it has been done. Good. So at the end, nothing wrong. She could add just a comment, or it might be a comment on image, title and description. You could add something like, thanks for taking this survey and the rest. Okay, so if you go to the response section, you're going to see all of the responses, right? Per question. And you see some exploratory analysis of each of the questions. Like for this question, you have only 5 responses. 60% agrees, 20% strongly agree, and 20% disagree. How long have you been a student? Somebody says for 4 to 5 years, somebody says for 6 years above. Have you been to the library before? Somebody says occasionally, frequently. Okay, so you could see some basic exploratory analysis which you could get using Python, SPSS, or any data analytics tool. Now, what we want to do is to see how can we put this into SPSS. But before we can do that, it's very important for us to know that once you come to responses, there's a sheet here. You could tap on it to create the Google Sheet. You could call it a name by its default name, or if you want to merge it to another that you already have, you tap on this button. But by default, it gives the name of the form, right? I tap on create, and your far most right. It now generates an Excel sheet. This Excel sheet is always going to be updated, right? It's always going to be updated. So and this is the link for the Excel sheet. You can also collaborate. Once it's finished loading, you could share, you could collaborate with other persons, especially anybody involved in the data science process. Somebody might not be in charge of or going to be working on the questionnaire design and tracking responses, but the person might be involved in actually putting this data from here to SPSS. So you could add the person's email here, and the person will have access to these sheets. And from time to time, you could copy the link. So this is the exact link. You could send this link to the person. And if you've added the person's email address here, and indicated if you want the person to be an editor or an owner. So what's the difference? For an owner, the owner is the person that created the form. The editor is somebody that can actually make edits here, whereas just a viewer is somebody that can only view the sheet without making any changes to it. Then the commenter will just only be able to make comments. If you use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, any of these Microsoft tools, you could make just comments, right? So those are the different types of permissions you have for the sheet. And for transfer of ownership, let's assume I want to transfer the ownership of this form to Oyin. I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to click here and change transfer ownership. She will have to accept the ownership, and the ownership will change from myself to her, right? If you also want to remove her access from this form, you tap on this button. So all of the things are here. I will do this transfer of ownership once I'm done with this particular session. Okay, so we're done. So this is the sheet we'll now want to enter in SPSS. So this is just timestamp. I'm not going to be needing that. So what I want to do now is to start up my SPSS. Okay, so I've kickstarted SPSS. It's loaded. So this is what my SPSS screen looks like. Once you have this on SPSS, I believe everybody's seeing my screen. Seen the SPSS window? Everybody, unmute yourself. Let me get a response.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So once you load up SPSS, you have quite a number of windows. You have the variable view window, the data view window. You also have a print window and two other windows, but we'll take it step by step. First thing you want to do is to get your variable view window and enter all of the questions and you have them in the different formats. Once you're done with entering the different variables, which are typically all your questions, a variable is a data holder. So a variable is that particular item that changes depending on the circumstance to hold a particular data. So that data are our questions. So each of the questions, what's your age? What's your age range? They are going to be our variables. The data is going to be each of these responses, each of these responses. Are we together? Okay, so first thing first, like I said, variable view. We just copy each of the variables, and when you want to enter variables into SPSS, it follows the universal principle of variables, right? The very basic principle of variables is when you are naming variables, you want to make sure that you don't have space in between them. Gender, you don't have space in between them. You cannot start with a number. If you want to have space in between, you could use this. You could use an underscore. It does not allow special characters like question mark, all of those. So I think that's basically that. I could supply a guide for us in terms of variables or other little tricks that can help you make sure that whatever you're doing, you do them to standard. So that's gender. That's the first question. You see, once you do that, automatically this gets populated. I'll come to that later on. Let me get to the second question, which is age range, right? Age range. I'll have to close this up or use a capital letter for the range. Level of education. So that's going to be the next variable, level of education, right? Next one is mode of studies. Mode of studies, close up the gap, because we cannot have space. If we use space, it's going to give you an error message. Occupation. Next one is section 2. Is library a physical place where books are, where collection of books is being kept, what are we going to call this now? The variable should actually be short, but the labels, you see the labels can be long. You're going to see that when we start running the analysis for this particular questions we've done. So variables should be as short as possible. The labels should be as lengthy as the question is. So it's for easy handling. So this one, we're going to just call this one library physical place. So we'll say library a physical place. Library a physical place. Okay, see, it's seen that there might be a character there that it doesn't need. Let me see, library. What I did was to say library physical place. It worked. I think maybe it was in the space or something. So the next question is how long have you been a student? Length of studentship, student length, how long student, just say how long student, just say how long student.
Or studentship length.
Or student length, studentship. Is anything like studentship?
Probably.
Studentship length. Studentship length. How long have you been a student? Okay, that's the studentship length. Have you been to the library before? Okay, let's just say library attendance. Library attendance. Undo, redo. Library what? Library. Okay, let's say library usage. Library usage. Library use. What's the issue? Library. Okay, I think it's in a space. Library use. Good. So it doesn't need a variable shouldn't have a space. It shouldn't have special characters. It cannot start with a number. It could start with a small letter. Doesn't mean it could start with a capital letter. I think those are those important you should know. How often do you visit the library? We could just say library visit. We could say weekly library visit, weekly library visit. So is it library or library?
It's library, but it's always called library.
Always. So the always, is it right or is it wrong?
No, are you talking about the spelling? Because what my point is that the spelling is library, but I don't know the.
Okay, so who knows? Do you often make research at the library? So we say research at library, right? We say research at library. Research at library. Good. Is library relatively calm and conducive for research and learning? Okay, so here we just say library.
Calm and conducive.
Library. Only you're the owner of this question. Response, please.
Library condition.
Okay, library condition. Library condition. Good. I will stop here, right? So I will send this SFV file on the group. So when you could write on, continue with the rest question and fill up the rest data once your research comes in. So I will stop in section 2. So what you're going to do, you're going to conclude for section 3. Then I'm also going to enter data for all of these 11 variables, 11 questions. Then once I give you the file, the SAV file, so SPSS file is always saved as an SAV file. So I'm going to save this, Control S or F12. You see, it's always an SAV file. So SPSS file are saved as SAV file. So I'm going to call this, importance of physical library learning in school. So just call it this. And I'm saving in my desktop, right? So it has saved. The importance of library physical library in schools. So I've entered all the variable names for my questionnaire. The next thing is you need to understand that for every kind of analysis you need to do, they have different data types. If you went through the questionnaire design class, where we looked at how to standardize your questions, you get to understand that you have numeric. If I tap on this button here, look at these three dots. If I tap on it, it could be numeric, it could be comma, it could be dot, it could be scientific notation, it could be data, dollar, custom currency, several types. Now, it all depends on how you want to run the analysis, right? So because we're going to be using zeros and ones to code data into SPSS, we're going to use take this as numeric data. We're not going to take that as a string. Now, you're going to understand as we move on in the class going forward, a string is textual content or textual data. Though gender is going to be replied as male or female, but when we are entering in the data view, we're going to be entering zeros and ones. So this is to help us better code data into SPSS and run our analysis. I'm going to explain further as we move on. So I'll choose this as numeric. You could ignore this. So this is just the length of the particular data you're going to be entering. For decimal places, I'm going to keep them all as 0. If I'm taking something like height, body mass index, if I'm taking things like maybe amount, currency in Kobo, I could have them in decimal places, let's say 2 or 3 decimal places. But since I'm going to be coding in zeros and ones, I wouldn't need them to have any decimal places, right? Label. So this is where you could now enter your question just as it is, the way you asked them. So for gender, I'm just going to go gender, or rather I'll pick, because I made an adjustment, made it better in the questionnaire design. So I will go here and pick what's your gender. So this one, you could just ask it exactly like you have it. What's your age range? What's your age range is a question. What's your level of education? What is your mode of education, mode of study? Next one is occupation. Next one is the library, physical place. Next one is how long have you been a student? Next one is have you been to the library before? Weekly library visits. Weekly library visits, yes, corresponds. How often do you make research at the library? Is the library relatively calm and conducive? Okay, so this is where we stopped, right? So the owner of this research is going to continue with the rest questions once you enter them. Okay, I'm going to collapse this. Now, values. So values will mean what are going to be your responses. So you could tap on this button and start adding the responses. So normally you could code 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3, 4, depending. I love to start from 0. So I'm going to code 0 as male, 1 as female. So this is the known standard for coding responses into SPSS. So that at the end of the day, when you start entering stuff in your data view, all you will be entering for each of the respondents is just going to be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 at the end of the day. So it makes it easier to enter data. So you wouldn't have to be handling this Excel sheet the way it is like this. For instance, this is male. So it's going to be 0. You enter 0. You're going to enter 1. You're going to enter 1. You're going to enter 0. You're going to enter 0. You're going to enter 0. So from the very first level of age, you're going to enter 0. Second level, 1. Third level, 2. Fourth level, 3. That way. It makes it easier for even just a basic PC user to do data entry. And data entry is one of the most cumbersome, most taxing part of the data science process. Because to design a questionnaire, literally relatively easy. To put it online on Google Form or Kobo Toolbox or Google or what was it called, Microsoft Form or SurveyMonkey, relatively easy. But to start entering the data into SPSS, right? Take for instance, there's one we did just last 2 weeks, 700 items for a client. It can take you 2-3 days to enter. So you won't be entering male, female into SPSS. No, you'll be entering those values. Is that clear? Any questions so far before we enter the next values? Any questions so far before we enter into the next value?
No questions, so for me. With you.
Okay, the next set of values is what's your age range. So the first one is below 14 years. So for 0, the label is 0 to 14 years. So we have, we have 15 to 20 years is 1. The next one is 21 to 30 years. So 2. The next one is 31 years and above. That's 3. So I don't need this one. I'll just hit on cancel. So I have 3 labels. I'll say, okay, that's all for that. I move to the next one, level of education. What are the levels below secondary school? Or are the labels? Add 2, 3. So 0 is what? Below secondary school. Undergraduates, that's 1. 2 is what? Graduate. And 3 is what? Masters and above. So you cannot skip, right? You cannot skip. So you either start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you do 0, 1, 2, 3. That way. Okay. I move to the next label, mode of studies. Online study. 2, 3. 0. Sorry. 0. Sorry, 1. Physical. Physical study. Hybrid. 2. Done with this. Next one is occupation. Students, employed, self-employed, others. So I think that's very straightforward. Well, I hope you're able to complete this for us. Self-employed, that's 2. Then 3 is going to be others. Okay. Library physical place. Okay, library physical place. So I have strongly agree. Zero, strongly agree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this Likert scale is 7 in number. Disagree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 is what? 2 is someone disagree. Neither agree or disagree. Somewhat agree. Agree. Strongly agree. So 6 are in. So let's do for studentship. Okay, I'm going to stop at 6 questions. I will delete 1, 2, 3, 4. I will delete that. Press my delete button. So I just have only 6 questions. I hope you understand the basics of entering your data into SPSS. Next thing you want to do is you could skip this missing columns, align. This automatically change up when you adapt your measure. So for scale, the question is, what type of data is each of these items? So for scale, things like that have they are numerical, and of course they are progressive in nature. Things like height. For ordinal, there could be categorical data. There could be numerical data. Then for nominal, most of the times categorical data. So, but because of the way we've coded our questions, we made them categorical in nature. Because you could see that we made male and female categorical in nature. 0 to 14 years, if you check it, 0 to below 14 years, 15 to 20. So they are all categorical in nature. So if you are going to be entering items that are things like age, and you want to pick the number as it is, then you might be using scale, right? So in this way we've coded our questions, we're typically going to be using nominal data for most of them, right? So I think that's all. So I'm going to stop this record, and in the last session of today's class, I'm going to be telling you how we're now going to code the data right into SPSS for the 6 responses we have and run some basic analysis. So you see, we have our variable view. So that's the very first thing we do. So once I hand this SAV file over, you're going to code the rest questions till I think about 15, 16 of them, and indicate the right values and the right labels. Also, you're now going to start entering the data for each of them. So for gender, the very first person, let's see, the first person on the Excel sheet is male. So male is 0. So what we just do is we just enter 0 here. The second response is 13, 31 to what is it called? 31 and above. If we check for the second question, 31 above, 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's 3. Just enter 3. So the normal thing you do is that before you start entering data into SPSS, you want to have what you call your code book. You want to have how you've coded everything into the small sheet so that entry data into SPSS is going to be very, very swift and very, very fast for you. So I'm going to stop here. Once I return after a 5 minutes break, we're going to enter just these 6 responses. Then we're going to run analysis for them.